Bunclody is a picturesque town located in the southeast of Ireland on the Carlow-Wexford border at the foothills of Mount Leinster. Over the years, the area has been known by different names, from Carrickduff, Bunclody to Newtownbarry and back to Bunclody in the 1950s. In the 1720s, the land in the estate was given by James Barry as a dowry or a wedding present to John Maxwell when he married Barry's daughter, Judith. Maxwell was so pleased he called this estate Newtownbarry in memory of his father-in-law. The name Bunclody means the end of the River Clody, and it is here the river runs into the Slaney. The earliest mention of Bunclody was in 1690 when local man Cahir, or Charles Kavanagh, was charged with treason and his address was recorded as Carrickduff, Bunclody. To find out more about the area, we spoke with local historian Father Seamas De Val.
You see, way back in the early centuries, thousands of years ago, people lived in a sort of circular enclosures. Well, now there were different kinds. Some of them were made of clay, and maybe sometimes they put a wooden paling all around then. You know, you've seen that. Well, now there was one of those over near where the golf links is now. And it's marked on the maps as the round O, because it was like an O. And the Irish word for that enclosure is a ra, R-A-T-H, R-A-T-H, ra, or so they say in English, rath. And this is known as the round O rath. Well, now that would have been there 1,000 years ago, and there were people living there. So you could say that would be the origin of Bunclody. Yeah. And there was also a tradition in Bunclody that there was a Carthusian monastery of monks over in that part as well. And the name of the saint who founded this order of monks was a man called Saint Bruno. And that part of the wood over there was always called, in my time, as Saint Bruno's. People refer to me over where the golf links is now as Saint Bruno's or Bruno's. And the possibility is that that was the site of an old monastery, even though there's nothing remaining now. So that would go back a long time as well. So you can say that there was a habitation here in Bunclody way back 1,000 years ago, and even before then, because some years ago there were Bronze Age. Now I can't give you the dates of the Bronze Age, but it was thousands of years ago. Long before Christ, they found spearheads, little spears or arrows or something near Bunclody here some years ago. They're in the National Museum in Dublin now. So that would go back thousands of years. So there were people around even as early as that. The family, the important family living around here were the Kavanaghs. Crevani lived in a place called Clonmullen, about 3 or 4 miles from here. It's on the banks of the River Clody, but on the County Carlow side of it. They had their castle there. And they were the direct descendants of the kings of Leinster. And they were there for hundreds of years. And at the time of what we call the Battle of the Boyne, there was a war between King William of Orange and King James, and at that time the Kavanaghs were on King James's side, who were beaten in the war, and all their lands were confiscated. And eventually, around the 1720s or so, a man called James Barry bought the land that was originally the Kavanagh's land. And he came to live here, and he had one daughter named Judith, and she married a man called John Maxwell, who was a native of County Cavan. And they were the only Barrys that ever lived here. James Barry, when he died, the daughter was Mrs. Maxwell. In fact, John Maxwell became the first Lord Farnham. Farnham is a townland in County Cavan where this family lived, the Maxwells lived, and when he was given the title of Lord, he took the name Lord Farnham. So Judith Barry was his wife. And then the rest of that family then were Maxwells, you see. And the land was sold, and eventually the Haldares came, who were Clody Haldare. Mrs. Norton is the present representative of that family. But it comes like this. You have all these families. You have the Kavanaghs, and then you have the Barrys for a short while, and then Maxwells and Haldares. They were the landlords. But the Kavanagh family was a very interesting family because they had with them, they had in their possession a gold crown that belonged to the kings of Leinster. And they had to go to get out of the country after the war. They were exiled, or you might say banished, if you like. They could either stay at home and get killed or go abroad, which they decided on the latter. They went to France, bringing the crown with them. And the crown was in a museum in Toulouse, I think in France, at the time of the French Revolution. And it was looted and probably melted down, so a wonderful treasure that we've lost.
Was Bunclody involved in the Battle of 1798?
1798, yes, it was. It was an important battle, but it was an unfortunate one for the Wexford men. It took place on the 1st of June, and there was a priest, a Father Moog Cairns. He was from up Kiltaley way. The insurrection, as we call it, of 1798 was on, and Father Moog Cairns decided that he wanted to take Bunclody, take possession of Bunclody for the insurgents. So he led a detachment of the soldiers up here, and they took the town all right, but then they dispersed and went into their houses, and they were getting refreshments and so on. And the English soldiers who had left and had gone up towards Kildavin decided, I think they met another group, and they decided to go back, and they came back to the town and took the insurgents by surprise, and the insurgents had to retreat and get out of the place, many of them being killed. But there's a little story after that, a long time after that. 77 years later, they were widening the bridge across the Slaney, the big bridge there. Up to then, the bridge was only about 2/3 the width that it is now. And they were widening it, and they were digging foundations for to construct the arches and so on. And they found a whole lot of bones, human remains. And it was thought that they might have been people who were killed in 1798. So they were taken up and they were interred in the old cemetery, which is up near the FCJ school. And there's a monument erected over them in memory of the men who died in 1798.
I also want to know about the Battle of the Pound.
Battle of the Pound. The pound is a word that's used in English as a field where stray animals would be put into, or animals that were to be kept for some purpose or other, for sale or something else. The pound field. And this happened in 1831. At that time, the Church of England, or the Church of Ireland, the Anglican Church, was the official church of the country. And everyone had to pay what they called tithes, sort of a tax, if you like, It didn't matter whether they belonged to that church or not, everybody had to pay. And there was a man living down in Tom Brick. It's about 4 or 5 miles down the road towards Enniscorthy, named Doyle. And he claimed to have paid his tithes. But the tithe collector said he hadn't. And in order to get their money, they took 2 head of cattle from him, and also 1 other animal from another person, and brought them up here to Bunclody, and they were going to be sold at a fair, and the money given to the minister of religion. And of course there was a lot of people objecting to that. So when the fair day came, the cattle were up on the square, the market square, where there's a sort of a park there now. It used to be open ground there. And somebody removed the cattle and pushed them away from where they were, and the cattle started walking down this road on the way home. And the police, they knew there were going to be trouble, so a lot of soldiers or yeomanry and policemen were drafted in from all over the place, from Enniscorthy and from Carloway and every other place. So they followed the cattle down the road, overtook them and brought them back and put them into the pound field. And they said there was going to be an auction. They were going to be sold there. And of course all the people were down along the road and everything, and the police and the yeomanry were lining the road. Somebody threw some stones at the yeomanry, because that time the roads were rough, with lots of pebbles and stones, and somebody threw them, and the man in charge of the yeomanry ordered the men to fire on the crowd. And there was 15 people shot dead. Well, some of them didn't die immediately, they died in a day or two after. And about 35 other people were wounded as well. So it's called the Battle of the Pound, but it wasn't really a battle. It was one-sided battle, if you like. There was an awful lot of the ordinary trades in Bunclody. And the Irish Street was a street with all sorts of trades in it. You had carpenters, blacksmiths, tailors, basket makers, I think harness makers or saddlers, shoemakers, all in Irish Street. And in fact, Doyle's, Porrick Doyle is a stone cutter, stone carver in Church Road, but they had their work. So his grandfather had his workshop in Bunclody as well. So he had all sorts of trades of that sort of going on. We had no big industries, no big factories or anything, except in the old days, Glaslacken, it's a hill a little bit out of town, it was a slate quarries. There were 2 slate quarries where they made slates or cut slates for roofing the houses. That would be the biggest. Clohaman, which is a couple of miles away, that had an industry, all right. They had a linen and a woolen factory there. The big factory is still there. The building is still there. It was built in 1813, and they made linen, which they exported there. Lewis was the name of the man that owned it. Lewis's. Their descendants had a drapery shop in Bunclody where the Eurospar shop is now.
There's a canal in the centre of the town. Why is it there?
I think it's just for beauty. I had a practical, that's the Mall we call it. Lady Lucy, oh yeah, there was a Lady Lucy Farnham that I forgot to mention too. One of the Maxwells married Lucy Mountnorris, who was a descendant of the Lord Anglesey who got all the land here after the Battle of the Boyne. She was a descendant of those, and she was Lady Lucy. And you have a restaurant in the hotel called Lady Lucy's at the present time. And there's a wood up, going up Carrickduff and turning on towards to the left, Lucy's Wood. It's all named after Lady Lucy. She was an important person that I forgot to mention, Lady Lucy Farnham. And she is given the credit of laying out the main street there, putting the Mal stream down and planting the trees up along. It also had a practical thing, because if you went up there and examined it, you'd see little outlets in the main street. So you had a supply of water, whether it was for drinking or for washing or what, I don't know, but mainly it was to beautify the street. We had both markets and fairs every Saturday. You see, this Bunclody being a centre of a large farming area, you had lots of farm produce like animals and chickens and eggs and butter, things like that. So there was a market here in my own time. There was still a market every Saturday. Every Saturday on the square you'd see people coming in donkeys and cars or horse and cars, bringing in chickens and at Christmas time turkeys, of course, and all sorts of things for sale on the square. Every Wednesday there was a pig market, and they were on the square. There's a weighing machine, or what do they call it, a weigh bridge or something over there on the square. Still, you'll see it, where the animals were weighed. So you had the pig market on Wednesday, you had the poultry market on Saturday, and then you had the fair days where cattle and sheep were sold. And you had a fair every month, and in 2 months of the year, one was June, I can't remember the second one, there were 2 fairs. So you had 14 fairs in the year as well. And that was a big day in this. We used to love it. School children loved fair days because we had no school on a fair day. The reason we were told at the time, when I was young, we were told that once when school was being held on a fair day, a child was killed by an accident on the street with the cars, horses and cattle and things going. So it was decided that there'd be no more school on fair days. So we loved fair days. At the fair day, you bring in sheep and cattle, and they would be on the square, but be also on the streets. Some down around Ryland, the Ryland Street, the top part of Ryland Road, and Irish Street, and all. You had what they called creels. They would put sort of rails around like that on the footpath, and you had a whole lot of sheep in these up along. The place was being in a mess that evening when the cattle or the sheep are all gone. Yeah, as well as that, there would be what we called stannons, stalls, where people they would come and set up their stall, and they would sell all sorts of things: delf, tools, rope, ladders, gates, clothes, all sorts of things on sale in the street. It was a great buzz in the fair day.
The school in Bunclody called the FCJ. When and why was it set up?
That was set up around 1860-ish. I can't give the exact date. I think it was around 1860. The Faithful Companions of Jesus is what the letters stand for. It's the name of a religious order of nuns whose work was teaching in secondary level schools. There was a priest here called Father Parle, and he was very anxious to improve the educational facilities in the town. And he invited the nuns to come and set up a school here in Bunclody. There's an interesting story about him. He lived up where the school is now. We also had our Catholic church there, and the priest's house was at the back of the church, and he gave his house to the nuns as a convent to start off with, and he himself got permission from the bishop to go to Australia to collect money in order that they could build a proper convent and school. Because that time you had a great lot of work going on in Australia in the gold mines. And a lot of Irish people were working in the gold mines. So Father Parle went out there and he visited the gold mines and spoke to the people there, said what he was doing, and collected a whole lot of money. And he put it into a bank or invested it in something, and the bank went broke and he lost everything. So the bishop gave him, he wanted to stay in Australia then, the bishop gave him permission to stay there, so he died in Australia, Father Parle. There's a photograph or a portrait of him hanging up in the porch of the church in Bunclody at the present time. In Laurel Hill, and they were in Limerick, you see, they came from there, they didn't come from France, they were already established in Ireland. But there was only the 3 convents, and then they got houses in Dublin then for the nuns that would be attending university.